Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Legal Tech Talks. My name is Frances Anderson, and I'm the MD of Netlaw Media. So today, I am thrilled to be hosting a highly current discussion, which is transitioning from law to tech with Shilpa Bakandaka, CEO of Nakoda, Linklater's backed technology startup. So what does Nakoda do? Now, this startup works closely alongside Linklater's lawyers and clients to design bespoke technology solutions for the practice of law. The flagship product, ISDA Create, is a document automation and digital negotiation platform built in collaboration with a client International Swaps and Derivatives Association, the ISDA, to automate and streamline high volumes of sensitive and complex contractual negotiations in the derivatives industry. Now, Shilpa started her career as a project finance lawyer, but her interest in technology and entrepreneurship led her to found, build, and sell a mobile app company, as well as grow a legal tech startup before rejoining Linklater's in 2018 as the head of innovation. She sits on the firm's innovation steering group, which is responsible for the firm's strategic approach to innovation and efficiency. Previous roles at Linklater's include being a founding member of the Linklater's India Group, COO for the India practice, and COO for the Africa practice. Now, before we continue, I need to run through a little housekeeping for those that have not joined one of our sessions before. So this session's recorded. It will last about an hour, and more than welcome to join us and ask questions throughout the whole session. So if you'd like to speak to Shilpa or to ask a question to one of the points that we're discussing, click on your name in the participation panel to ask a question live. So we'll see your hand get raised and I'll bring you in so you can ask your question directly and join in the conversation that we're going to have. Alternatively, there is a chat function, so please do, put through comments through the chat. Again, we'll pick that up and we'll bring them into the flow of the conversation or through the Q&A at the bottom. So type out your question, we'll be monitoring it throughout the session. Now, let's have a look at what we're going to be discussing. So there's been a huge amount of discussion on legal tech startups, I should say. Sorry, I need more coffee, including incubators. Now, to set the scene, Nakoda was formed in 2017 and has a team of lawyers, designers, and engineers that work closely together to build technology and automation solutions for clients globally. As we, the legal community, continue in a client-driven and highly challenging market, today, we're going to explore how law degrees and various experiences in the practice of law can be a significant differentiator and a valuable asset when developing and building a legal tech platform, and also shaping client service delivery through innovation and law and tech. Now, more than ever, leadership is key to steer the way. So Shilpa, firstly, welcome. It's great to have you with us today. So it's the first time we're having this kind of conversation, so I'm thrilled. Tell us, what inspired you to pursue a career in law?
Well, thank you for having me, for starters. That was a fantastic introduction. I sound very good on paper, I have to say. But I think in the course of the conversation, I think the audience will realize a lot of how my career has panned out has been not by design, but been by being open to opportunities. So even from the very beginning, what inspired me to pursue a career in law, it's a whole host of pretty unscientific reasons, if I'm honest. So my mom was a lawyer. My mom is a lawyer, retired now. And what she did sounded interesting and very clever. Like everyone she was with just sounded very clever and had a wonderful way with words. I was in the school debating team, so I spent many, many years hearing, oh, you argue really well, you should be a lawyer, which is, I think, stereotypical, I suspect, in South Asian families, but it's just interesting, right? Because then it kind of sticks with you. But I think for me, what it was in the end was two of my favorite subjects in school, so I did computers as well, but two of my favorite subjects were what we call civics up to GCSE, and I used to audit the political science class for A-levels. And a lot of what we talked about was the Indian Constitution, which I know this is going to sound really pathetic and really quite sad, but to me, it was just, it was and still is a fascinating document, right? So unlike the UK that doesn't have a written constitution, or the US that has quite a short one, the Indian constitution is really long. It's like 450 provisions, X number of schedules. But it was also, it's a country that fought for independence, and then it had all of these dreams and visions for what kind of a country it was going to be captured in this one document. That's what it was meant to do. So when you think of it that way, how the document was structured, you know, the fact that directive principles came before fundamental rights, right? So how we were going to be as people, as citizens of India, trumped your fundamental right that you could go to court and actually enforce. Where we put freedom of religion, where that was over and above equality, for example. These are just really interesting things on how people think about documents. And I think that was it. I guess when I went into law, I thought I was going to be a litigator. I thought I was going to stand at some point in the Supreme Court of India and argue sort of these large public interest litigation cases. Not quite how it turned out, but that was sort of the original, I guess, inspiration for the profession. That's what made it really interesting to me.
But then you've sort of taken a slightly different turn, so as well, haven't we? So when did you realise, I suppose, looking at, obviously, that was sort of setting the scene, going into the kind of the legal side and your understanding of law and your interest there. When did you realise you had a keen interest in technology? Because let's be frank, it's actually quite difficult finding a huge amount of women or girls who come through this. So it's quite a, you know, try and encourage that. So when did you get that spark of interest?
So there's been a long gap, right? So I did, like I said, I did sciences and computers in school. And then I skipped many, many years as a lawyer, as a business manager. I did an MBA, no interest in tech really in that sense. And then in 2015, I actually left Links to start a company of my own. And you would think I'd be really interested in tech then because it was a mobile app company, but my co-founder was the technical person on the team, right? So he had a background in software engineering, in product. I was very much the person who handled fundraising and sales and BD and comms and all of that. I think it was that journey, though, that got me really interested. And to me, it was just so fascinating, right? Like, there was a whole efficiency piece. Like almost everything is more efficient if you bring tech to it. But there was the human aspect of it. Why are products designed in the way they are for you to, you know, how is it that you onboard a new customer? What is UX, you know, the user experience? How do you design a product in a way that gets people engaged and enthusiastic and gets the best out of it? How do you think about, you know, on the business side, how do you think about the return on investment on a feature you want to build? So I think it was more kind of peering over to see what my co-founder was pretty much meant to be handling and going, that's really interesting. And if that's interesting for the product I'm building that has nothing to do with law, everything then kind of became, oh, that has a tech aspect to it. That has a tech. And if you think about it, like in the century we're in, everything has a technology aspect to it if you just stop and engage. It was also just, I think through that process, I did a coding course. I will never be a great developer, I will admit that. But I did a couple of quite basic courses. But to me, the interesting thing with those was it was a lot like being a lawyer. Like the way you have to structure your code, the way you have to make sure there are no errors, the way that you have to make sure, you know, like it all works together. If you're changing one, you have to make sure it works right through. It was remarkably like being a project finance lawyer with a 200-page document and working, you know, making sure everything works okay. And then also just, I think, meeting a whole new world of people who had nothing to do with law, you know, developers, designers, people who did sales in you know, like sort of SaaS products. It is just a remarkable world. Like it genuinely is. I think like technology is clearly what is going to drive the economy going forward. And I would encourage people just to look out of their, you know, boxes and see what there is out there. But that was it for me. I mean,
I think you know, the technology is massively important. I think especially when you're combining both now, it's a whole different area, isn't it? Especially when you're looking at you've now got it's not just coding, but where the engineers can come in and where STEM leads to. But looking at your kind of self, so the merge of law on one hand, what you were studying, and then sort of tech. When did it become apparent that you were a career path was developing for you?
Um, Entirely serendipitously, to be honest. So again, we sold the mobile app company, and that had nothing to do with law, right? It was aimed at school parents. It was a communication app. And like I said, I really enjoy tech, but my big takeaways was, well, I understand law and I enjoy tech. And I went into work in startups.com and I literally put legal tech, not expecting anything to come out. And it just so happened that a early stage startup was recruiting for a mat leave cover. So it was like 4 months. I was due to actually move countries and join my husband in Amsterdam. So for me, it was that perfect duration of time. I was like, okay, I can do this for 4 months, really get to understand, does my knowledge of the legal services space and my interest in tech, is there anything that actually could bring it together? 4 months is long enough to get to know a market, but short enough not to feel like this really big permanent move. I ended up staying for a year and a bit because it was so much fun and it was so interesting. But yeah, it was, and I think from there, it's just been, I mean, the industry has grown hugely because this was sort of 2017 now. The industry has grown hugely since then. So in some ways, it was luck, good timing, and I think just being a little bit brave because not the most natural jump probably when you're used to working in big law firms and big institutions. A very early stage startup is a completely different beast.
So you were sort of a role model for many, I'd say, sort of trainees coming through, for even students who are yet to get their foot on on the career in law, so who are looking to come in. What advice would you give those who are interested in pursuing a career in legal tech?
Oh, lots of advice. So the first is actually work on...
Narrow down.
But I think the first is actually the most important is actually work out what you mean by legal tech, right? And the beauty of it is it's so wide. It means different things to different people and it's constantly evolving. And so when I say the beauty of it is you get to actually shape your own career now in this space because the market's evolving and you can evolve with it. So, for example, my role, I am the least technical person in the Nakoda team, right? It's a constant joke, I am. But my experience is very different. What I do is very different, but that's still legal tech. I have legal engineers on my team. Some have law degrees, some don't, and they help digitize our documents. I have product managers on my team who actually help design each of the features, have a vision for what the product is going to look like. Some have law degrees, some don't. I have UX and UI designers. None have law degrees. And some have worked in legal, some haven't. So, and actually very recently I spoke to a young person who's like, I'm interested in legal tech. And I was like, well, which aspect? Yeah. And some of that is actually just talking to people. So I put him in touch with actually just various people in the Nakoda team. Like, what is it about their day jobs that excites you the most, right? What is it that they're actually doing? Forget job titles for a minute. Work out what someone's doing on a day-to-day basis and figure out what is it that you enjoy, what is it that you don't enjoy, because that's step one. Then reach out to them, like just reach out to people and ask questions. The legal tech community is actually very collaborative and very friendly. People have had different journeys and just learn from that. I would do online courses as well. Like there's so much stuff online, whether it's, Khan Academy, Coursera. So I think the younger members of the audience, if you've not come across it, Inside Sherpa or Forage, fantastic sort of virtual internships that will really give you a sense of the space. And I think more importantly, just be open, do internships, do short-term projects, put yourself out there a little bit more, take the risk. I mean, when I did the startup thing, the joke in my family was I was paying more for childcare than I was getting paid, but I viewed it as a long-term investment in my career, and it's been totally worth it. And you can either view it as a line, your career, or you can view it as a graph, but hopefully with a hockey stick. But you do have to invest. And so my advice, I think, is be curious, be open to what's out there and ask a lot of questions, and then design your career to suit what you're interested in and actually also what you're good at. If you don't like a lot of detail, don't be a developer. Like it won't suit you. But there is such a fabulous community. I think it would, I think any young person, or actually any person who wants to pursue a career, there's just so much more available to them now than there ever was.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot which, but more so if you have a look over the past, 4 or 5 years, with the collaborations which are happening between the universities and the law firms themselves, which are shaping, I think, are shaping the way the future should be for the people who are working, who are coming into law, because we're now in a digital, we've always been in a digital world, but now everyone's online. Everything is now, look how many applications we all have, pretty much gadgets, in the house. We are no longer where we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think
but a lot of the roles, so when I was recruited as the head of innovation, I was the first one at the firm. Legal engineers, we didn't have any 4 years ago. Like, the term didn't exist. Law firms didn't hire product managers 3 or 4 years ago. So a lot of this is also just look at what people are doing now, but actually look at what roles didn't even exist 5 years ago, and then extrapolate a little bit. Like, if the market is going in this direction, what skills are law firms or, legal departments likely to need? They will be very different to the skills they needed 10 years ago. Even outside of tech, right? Even if you look at legal project managers, they're just skills that weren't relevant, weren't as valued, and the world has changed. So just, if you can look ahead, even before employers realize that they need those skills, when they finally get there, you're genuinely going to be so well placed to actually capture those roles and kind of lead those institutions then.
So looking at the kind of roles and now sort of digging in a bit into the kind of tech platforms which are here, from your insight, so from your view, how can law degrees and various experiences in the practice of law, so what people have done, what we've talked about, where your interest was, how can this be a significant differentiator, do you think, or an asset when developing and building a legal tech platform?
Well, ultimately, I have really strong views on this, right? So you're building technology for users, right? And if you have a law degree or you've got experience in the sector, you are going to understand, you're going to have an advantage over any group of people trying to build technology for lawyers who've never been in the space, who don't know how lawyers work. Lawyers work in, I'm going to say quite a unique way, right? And that's just how it is. It's changing, but it's changing slowly. So if you have two things, if you understand how documents work, that's a huge advantage. So it's just law school. It's such a huge advantage because you already know how these documents work, how they're structured, how they're used, how they're meant to be used. And then you add to that practice of law, which is then the psychology of and the practical reality of how lawyers work with these documents. And that's incredibly valuable. And I've seen this, I guess, in my innovation role. I've lost track of how many legal tech products I saw. Obviously, like testing it for our lawyers to use, testing it for clients to use. And in the first 10 minutes, you can tell if someone with a law degree or legal experience has been involved with the design of that product at all, right? Whether it's the pitch or whether it's the design of the product itself. And then very quickly after that, you can tell how much feedback that they've got, whether from their product team or more widely from real live lawyers who are meant to be using it. Right? I do think you can sometimes say, due diligence, doing due diligence exercises is hopefully painful, it's very efficient, inefficient, et cetera, and someone will come up with a solution that is a perfect point solution. If you are not a lawyer and don't appreciate that that is one step of a 85-step process to get something out to the client. But I don't even mean to be like, I don't mean this with any disrespect.
If you don't, when it comes to an event, and now I'm hearing 85, I'm going to add them up, see?
but that's it, right? There's a process when you're doing these things, when you're delivering legal services. If you're designing a solution for one particular spot in that, how does that fit with everything else? And even simple things like if you're doing something for closing, the likelihood is that lawyer is going to be using that product pretty late at night, right? They're not going to be using it at like 2 in the afternoon. You tend to close deals like you have to get it done on the day. It's going to be late in the evening. Are you then expecting them to go off the platform that they use, sign something and bring that on the platform? That's never going to happen. But if you've ever done a deal in your life, you know that intuitively, you just know not going to be able to make them change. So I do think, I mean, without a doubt, it's not a necessity, but the knowledge of law, practice of law, the experience, working in a law firm, even in a non-legal role, hugely helpful when you're designing products. I mean, that's effectively the Nakoda USP, right? Like one of the big reasons I chose to move to the CEO role of Nakoda, and I loved being the head of innovation of Links, was for the first time I saw a product where I was completely wowed by it. Like and it was part of like an internal demo, and I'm like, oh wow! And every question I had, I was like, but what if I want to do this, this, and this? And what if the client wanted to do this, this, and it was all thought through. But it's because people who understood how lawyers and clients work had designed the product. So no, I think it's a huge advantage to have that law degree, even if you don't land up practicing law. And if you put in a few years and really get to know how law is practiced and how it's delivered, and then go into legal tech, even more useful, without a doubt.
So you've led really nicely into Nakoda, where you are now. So having a look at the lead up into where Shilpa came from, and your thoughts and development, and some advice for people who are listening, but also who will be yet to listen, but who are coming into the industry. As the CEO of Nakoda now, how has your experience, do you think, to date supported you in shaping and sort of delivering more efficient client services? So looking at now the client side and what you've done to what you are now going to be delivering.
I guess everything I've done so far has given me, I think, a good sense of the supply chain, like the overall supply chain in legal, right? So from being the lawyer, which is on the production side, kind of creating the documents, negotiating, drafting them, being in the tech space where we're looking at how you do that efficiently. What is it that the client, and in this case, it would be like in-house lawyers, what is it that they're asking? Actually, and in the tech space, it's also sort of how would you deliver. This is one of the beauties of being in a startup, actually, outside of large organizations, is you have very few resources. So even how you run your business, everything is about scale. So what technology can you use on your sales cycles? What technology can you use on customer support so that you don't have to hire loads and loads of people, right? All of that knowledge is now being, I guess, fed into the Nakoda strategy and the Nakoda business plan. A lot of the stuff on legal design that we did in the innovation space, again, you know, the whole being empathetic to what is the problem that your clients are facing, and not jumping to a conclusion. So with Nakoda, we get a lot of client feedback. So every feature that we design, we have our Linklaters innovation team helping with sort of the specking of it. We show it to our lawyers to see if it works for them, and then we show it to our clients. So we don't tend to launch anything actually unless our clients have actually told us they will use it, that it adds value, it solves a particular pain point. And even so is the Create IQ, we have been very crystal clear that there is one problem we're trying to solve, and that's around contracting. That we're not trying to solve the world's problems, or not yet anyway, but it is about making document creation much more efficient. And then separately, because it's so interlinked, it is about making the data that's contained in these documents accessible, right? Because traditionally they've just been lost in Word documents and PDFs. So all of that, I think, all of that experiences, I think, come together really nicely to be able to design and deliver a product that actually adds value to our clients' day-to-day lives. And not just our legal clients, because a lot of the data is actually more useful to their wider business colleagues, to their risk functions, their compliance functions. So what we're then able to do with all of this is actually give a business a product, which is a legal tech product, but it's actually just a business product that could actually help them make really intelligent business decisions as well.
So do you think those looking at coming into basically a career in law are going to be faced with tougher competition now if they're not going to actually differentiate themselves, like coding, like you did, doing a coding course, or tech education, studying elements of STEM. Do you think this could don't do that? Don't bother?
So I think right now we don't have enough people in law with a technical background at any level, right? Even sort of people who studied sciences in university or studied sciences at A levels. So I think right now, very, very much a differentiator. I think it will change over time because there is more interest, and as everyone does coding, it'll stop being a differentiator. But I think it is getting more competitive because it's such an interesting career, right? And you can do so much in it. But I don't think it is about coding or about any particular skill. I think it's more about an approach. I think if you want a long-term successful career, you have to be open to change. And part of the challenge is we don't know how the industry is going to change yet. We know it's going to. We know technology is going to play a big part in it. But we cannot tell you today. I can't tell you today what roles, what skills you will need in 5 years. Mm-hmm. The beauty of actually being interested, I think, in technology is not for the coding, but that industry lends itself well to that thinking. Because technology is constantly evolving, right? So if you're interested in tech, you see software being updated all the time. You see tech companies pivoting, right? So Netflix used to be, I think people forget Netflix used to send you DVDs in the post. And that was considered tech because they had an algorithm that would tell you, what DVDs you'd get in what order. And then they went online, and then they decided to make their own content. If you're interested in any kind of tech, this evolution of a business model comes naturally, I think, to you. And that would end up being your advantage, not necessarily your knowledge of coding. I don't know if that answers your question. But to me, I think
it's interesting there, because I think at the moment people don't know, even if you're a current lawyer, for example, you want to change in career, which way do they go? If you're coming back into law, i.e. you've had children, you're re-entering again, what can you upskill to? So you've got so many people who are, I think, in that kind of flux, whether they're coming, they're starting or they're coming back. And I think it's an interesting one, because even I will admit, I've got my 7-year-old who's I'm getting her coding. Trust me, she's on the White Hat Junior Coding Club, but she loves it. But yet, you're right. If too many people do it, then ultimately you're going to have too many people in that space. So,
but I think at some point, right now it's an advantage. I think at some point it will be a base requirement. I cannot see in 15 years how in almost any industry you will not require people to be just conversant in technology, right? Most kids are hopefully learning how to code now. Both mine are. I haven't asked them to, the school requires it of them. They're interested in it as well because they're on their devices the whole time. They want to know how things work.
That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. But yes, I think right now it could be a differentiator. So if anyone's looking right now to re-enter the profession or enter, definitely an advantage, I think. It also shows that you're open to learning new skills. And I think, like I said, I think that in itself is something that employers are looking for. That approach is powerful.
So what's been the most exciting thing about your journey so far, Shilpa?
I think what I'm doing now, I'm loving it. I think it's come together. It has been by luck, but I think it has come together. My interest in law, I think I found a firm that I really enjoy working with. So even where I work, the product, which is, like I said, I think it's beautifully designed and has, so much potential. The people I work with, it combines sort of my business skills, my love for startups, all of that in one role. So for me, I think by far the most exciting role I've had is the one I have now.
And what's been the most challenging? If you start with the one thing where you, what have you enjoyed the most? What's the most exciting? What has been the challenge for you?
So this has also been, and there are a couple of things on the challenge. So this has also been my most challenging role, which is maybe why I'm enjoying it so much, right? I think part of being in a startup is you are responsible for everything, right? And you also don't get to advise, you have to decide. So I don't always have all the facts, but you have to kind of make a call. Are you going to launch this XYZ tomorrow? This is what the data protection rules say, can you or can't you? And you have to make a call, like it's not always black and white. I think when I first got into tech, that was probably the most challenging career move I've made. I think kind of from going from a deep expert, like being a project finance lawyer, to then doing marketing, doing, drafting sort of contracts, employment contracts, because we couldn't afford to, hire lawyers to do it, which is the irony, handling, investor relations, all of that. That was, I'd say, the most challenging, partly because you're going wide, but partly because there was no one to tell you what to do. You just had to make a call based on the information you had and the research you'd done. And that bit, I think, for me in Nakoda is magnified. So it makes it both exciting but equally challenging, right? The buck stops with you.
Yeah, I think, as an entrepreneur or someone who is in that, absolutely, it's one of the biggest things, isn't it? You have that weight on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And you've got the lawyers as well around you.
Lawyers as investors, lawyers as users. Yeah.
No pressure. So
challenging.
So what have you, if we have a look at the legal sector as a whole, and obviously Nakoda, what you're doing now, what has been the key changes you've seen in the industry, in the terms of strategic approaches to innovation, efficiency? What have you seen?
So there's a few big changes that have happened, right? So I think thanks to regulation growing at an exponential level, I think the use of technology to solve legal problems has risen, without a doubt, because there's some things, whether it's Brexit or IBOR repapering, that you just don't have enough lawyers on the planet to do, so you will always need technology. So that's been interesting. I think as a consequence of the financial crisis as well, you've seen lots more people trying to do more with less. So again, much more adoption of technology and interest in technology. But outside of tech, but related, I think what's been interesting is I think there's just been a lot more collaboration between law firms and clients. I think there's a recognition that some of these problems are market or systemic that we can solve together. Neither of us is going to solve it on our own. And you see a lot more communication, I think, between clients and their advisors. You see a lot more projects. So even, is the create, it's been built together with the client, because we were trying to solve a problem in the derivatives market space because there was a, reg reform deadline that had to have, exponential number of contracts repapered before then, right? So, and you can either do it on your own or you can do it together. And I think more and more you're seeing clients talking to their advisors and vice versa, so that you build solutions that are fit for purpose. I think that I'd like to think that trend will continue. Clients and advisors communicating, because it's not a zero-sum game. I think there's lots we can do together where clients win, lawyers win, like private practice lawyers. Because again, private practice lawyers didn't go into it to kind of do the admin, mundane grunt work that, they went in to do really interesting bits of law, to do all the clever stuff. So I think it's in all our interest that we use technology and innovation to sort of deliver services differently to how we used to.
So we've got Safiso who would like to ask a question live. I'm going to bring you in, Safiso, if you want to. I'm going to allow you to talk. So do you want to ask your question to Shilpa?
Oh, hi, Francis.
Hi there.
Hey, guys. Thank you for the platform. And I have a question for Shilpa. I'm going to speak to the whole effect of a user-centric approach. To what extent can developers bypass that, because in certain cases you find that you don't get the answer that you want from users, but you have to like take the hard call or decide that, you know what, you are going forward with the product, and then ultimately you find that the product becomes a success, even though that's not what the user specified. But just want to ask, to what extent can we limit ourselves to following strictly the user-centric rules or the user-centric approach, whereby you find that some innovators, especially I know with Apple has been doing this for years, whereby Steve Jobs was like, you know what, let us decide what's good for the user. Let us just innovate, let us just create great products, let's just bring something different. Because sometimes you find that when you want a response from users, what you get is a repetition of things that has been out there because they've been working. So, they will try to tweak the language, but even though when you try to look deeper into it, you're like, okay, this thing is practically what they've been using before. So just want to ask, to that context, to what extent can we ignore that user-centric approach?
Thank you.
I think that's an excellent question. And so you're right. So I do think there are times when we ignore what our users ask for if we are very confident that we are 2 steps ahead of them, right? So there are definitely things even on in the Nakoda world where we have a vision for the product, and on particular features, on a particular functionality, what the user is asking for doesn't fit with that big picture vision, and they may not know actually what the big picture vision is because we have to take them on that journey, right? And especially in law, where I think our users tend to be a little bit more cautious, I think, as a user base than many others. But it is a constant balance, right? So with everything, I think you have to have your big picture vision, and that is set with equally sort of big picture users. It's not going to be set with every single one, but if you are the only one who thinks that is useful, I would question how much money you're going to invest in a product where all the feedback you're getting on your vision is not aligning. Then if you break it up into sort of feature by feature, update by update, does everything have to be on every one of those, would you take into account everything every client says? No. But I think it all feeds into how you design and ultimately deliver the product. So there's a balance to be had between listening too much, but I think I've seen a lot where they don't listen at all. Or I've seen a lot of products where I'm like, have you actually spoken to any users of this? And you kind of know pretty early on that they haven't. But you are right, there has to be a balance. There's lots of products, if you'd asked people, they would have just been like, no, don't need it. And then you build it and give it to them. And it's, oh, wow, amazing. I mean, these earpods are like that, right? When they came out, like everyone was like, who needs earpods? Like they look odd and all the rest of it. And now you see them everywhere. And they're useful. And I don't think if anyone at Apple had asked, they would have built it.
I have to admit, with the earpods I was introduced to, I still remember having the wires not long ago, last year. So I won't even say that one. Chic in one spec and not in the others. So no, that's interesting. And, thank you, Safiso, for the question. It was great to, ask about the client-centric model, because I think it's really important. It's like collaboration, because I wanted to ask on that because you brought that in, and absolutely collaboration is key. How important is collaboration for you and what you're doing now, Shilpa, do you think, in terms of the coder, the team, and
everything? Like it is, to me, the only way to build a good product is to collaborate with users, end users, and what I call testers. So for me, we work very, very close with, obviously, Linklater's lawyers. So we have, the Nakoda team is sort of standalone within Links. So we collaborate with the practice to begin with. Like we make sure that the documents that we're putting onto the platform, are they being designed in a way, can they use it in a certain way? Then it's with the clients, like we show it to them, we do multiple demos, like what are they thinking? How do they do things in-house? And then it's their clients, right? Because ultimately, like I was saying, a lot of what is contained, all the data that's contained in these documents, the legal team will finish negotiating and then they're done, they're on to the next deal. but the data in that is useful to their business as a whole, right? It's useful to their operating teams, their risk teams. So how do those teams use these contracts? Once they're signed and closed, like how are they using all this information? So collaboration for me is key. It's relatively new in legal, like we call it legal design, but design thinking, a lot of that, I think that should probably be compulsory in law school soon. But
could you imagine telling that to some senior partners and managing partners?
Yeah, like forget tort law. But like, so we've introduced it, right? Like we have now design thinking training for our lawyers at Linklaters, and it's something that has evolved over the last year and a bit. And like I say, it has genuinely evolved because we've learned so much about how to deliver particular transactions or services to our clients through that process. And it's not one of those, here's a tick box, here's a checklist, tick it off. It's an approach. And it will be different if you're a structured finance lawyer doing a particular kind of deal, and it'll be different if you're a M&A lawyer on an IPO. But ultimately, it's about how are you collaborating with your client, how are you understanding, what is it that they need out of you? What is it that they are trying to achieve on this transaction? Who else is involved? All of that is pretty much designed, and then you deliver your product accordingly, right? Or in this case, your advice or legal service. But I don't think, because all our products now, especially on the tech side, are designed to be used by so many different people, and they have to evolve because you have to keep updating, they have to evolve with your users' own ambitions and strategies. Without the collaboration, you're just going to get left behind. Like you'll have a perfect for 2020, and you'll get to the end of 2021, and it won't be as relevant because you haven't spoken to the client about how it fits with their strategy for document automation, or their digital strategy more generally, or what's happening in their market, which is going to actually change what you're doing entirely. So I think communication is key for any legal tech team.
Well, I think that has been the hardest journey, hasn't it? I think for the legal community is the collaboration, inter-firm collaboration. It's now a word, co-opetition, or, which I know has been bandied around. We've spoken on it, co-opetition. Brand new to me in 2020. I think, this whole thing, I don't know if you agree, but this whole period within the pandemic, and even just beforehand, really, when it started surfacing, back end of 2019, firms started talking more. I mean, there's always been a community, but they started sharing. And sharing is very rare, where obviously lawyers are competitive, But
it's not just competitive, right? Like if you think of I have some sympathy for lawyers, because what they do, if you think about it, especially at large law firms, right? What they do for the most part is incredibly confidential. So it's drilled into you very early on that what you're doing, whether it's a sensitive sort of financial data in it, whether it's data protection rules or whatever it is, you have to protect it. And I think that approach then sometimes obviously seeps into other aspects of how you operate as a business. And I think some of that has changed. I think in the tech and innovation space, it is definitely more collaborative. I think there's an appreciation there is no sort of golden bullet. Like it's not like there's some magic pill that we're going to take and we're all going to, it's going to be how each firm executes, how each firm executes to their strategy, right? Each firm has a different strategy. You might be going after different markets. So what you want out of technology is going to be different. You can use the same technology product completely differently in two different firms. And I think there's been a greater appreciation of that it's not the panacea. Like, I think 5 years ago, it was like, oh, AI is going to come and whoever gets the right AI is going to take them out. It's not that simple. It's so much more nuanced.
Yeah.
And I think that there's also just so many, like if you look at the legal tech maps that are out there, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products. So again, when I was the head of innovation, I could either sift through all of them myself, right? And without, like, you have to be careful what you can and can't share, but or you could share like what are the products that you are finding useful versus the ones you're not, like, because it's not that the product is good, it's how you're going to use it, how you're going to get your lawyers to use it, that's ultimately going to make the difference.
Well, we've got a question again coming in from Sophie. So thank you. You're quite engaged. It's great on open source, actually. But actually, it will lead in to your my crystal ball question to you, Shilpa. So,
oh Lord,
what are your thoughts on the rise of open source? Do you think it's the new business model, his own?
I think it has incredible potential to disrupt. So I'm going to have to go with yes, probably.
Yeah.
But not short term. I find these questions quite hard because I don't know. I don't think in you're going to see that much in the next couple of years. But I think the capacity to disrupt over a 5 to 10 year horizon would be could be very interesting.
Well, a lot of people turn to open source, don't they? In the sense with regard, and that's where the coding and the building behind the scenes, for example, with the businesses and where the products are from. But also at the same time, I think this is where the guidance, isn't it, on collaboration with your partners, with the lawyers, with the supply chain actually will help build and create something new. And if we have a look at some of the new models which have come in, it's been fantastic, with the advance of some of the more streamlined businesses, not just Nakoda, but you also have a look at some of the other law firms who've got new models as well, and what's been developed behind the scenes with the support of them. But let's have a look at predictions and the crystal ball, as I was saying. So obviously this is just, and no one's going to hold you to it here, Shilpa, but what do you think? So looking at everything which has been happening around you, where the market is, how fast things have been escalating, what has been coming in, what's your predictions for the future, do you think, of legal tech?
So some of this, I think we've talked about already, right? So I think short to medium term, I think automation and digitization, like without a doubt. If you just look at sort of the research on how much revenue is hemorrhaged by institutions because contracting is as inefficient as it is, I think it was, some report had like 9.3% of revenues of a firm are lost, not like a legal firm, of a company are lost through inefficient document management and contract management, not profit, revenue, and that's shocking. So I think document automation, digitization for sure. I think data is going to be the interesting one. I think the industry is still so nascent. We're so early in legal about even, I think, viewing what we have access to as data rather than as words or information. And this is not just sort of contractual data, but also know-how in firms. So all of this amazing know-how that's been built up sometimes over 100 years in law firms, how are you actually surfacing that? How are you getting intelligent information from that? How are you delivering it to your lawyers so that they can actually deliver legal advice quicker with all of the institutional knowledge behind them? I think technology. I think legal tech will get better designed. This is the one thing I don't know how many people from law firms we have on the call, but I do feel like we give our lawyers sort of 1980s sort of technology. Like it's so unintuitive and cumbersome to use. And these are the same people who are using, like Netflix and Spotify and Google and are used to very intuitive ways of working outside of work. So I think there's a massive piece around that. I think commercially we'll see more consolidation. I think, again, touched on it very briefly, the market is just too fragmented. There are too many point solutions. I think we will definitely see, I think we're seeing the start of it already, sort of many more integrations between high quality products, but I think we will increasingly see consolidation as well. So that it's easier for us as users to then be able to have a suite of documents that works, products that work well together, or a platform, rather than having to literally onboard like 20 different types of tech for one transaction type, right? So if I'm doing an IPO, I don't want to do 20 different have 20 different bits of tech in my tech stack.
So looking at one, having just one.
Fewer, and an easier way, like because technology keeps changing, an easier way to onboard new technology. So if I like a particular product and I want to use it now, it might not be cutting edge in 3 years and I want to switch. Are there easier ways of actually embracing new technology? Because it is quite difficult right now, especially for larger law firms, right? I mean, there's just a lot of infrastructure involved in, moving data and all the rest of it. So
do you think so? I know you may, just as a comment, because obviously looking at the startup where Nakoda are, not so much of a startup as such, 2017. But do you think we're in a startup bubble? That's been banded around a little bit, hasn't it, in the press? Do you think we've seen that kind of peak where we are at the moment, or do you think more is going to come through, especially with the advancements of high performance computing, so HPC and AI? You've got more advancements in e-discovery solutions, documentation, all of this. Where we are, do you think?
I think in some bits of it we are in a bubble, but exactly what you said. So I think there is still so much scope. There are so many parts of the legal business that still haven't been touched. A lot of what you're seeing right now is very much based on making a transaction more efficient, not the entire business of law. So that's kind of game-changing stuff. Startups in that space, I think there's huge amounts that are still very, very open to kind of being done differently. But in certain spaces, like I think there's only that many, closing checklist technology tools that I need, right? So I think there's a certain space where I think it's not hype. I think we're just probably a bit overcrowded. And that's partly because the industry is fragmented, right? You have a beautifully designed product that comes out of Berlin, then another beautifully designed product that comes out of Tel Aviv, and another one that comes out of San Francisco. So that's what I'm saying. And they kind of are all addressing the same pain point. It is a pain point.
Yeah.
And we as buyers of legal tech, do you wait till you see who's the natural one? Because again, it genuinely is quite hard. We've onboarded, sometimes we thought a product is amazing, and then in 12 months, the startup is shut down. Like, you can't afford that as well. Like, so there is a little bit of, as much as law firms get grief for not moving fast enough, we're not going to onboard technology unless we're sure you're going to last the course. In addition to being very robust and, safe for us to put client data on and all the rest of it, the challenge with startups is always, are you going to last the course? Because I'm going to invest a lot of money bringing you into our system, training our lawyers to use you. If you're going to disappear in 12 months, that leaves me with a bit of a problem.
Yeah, very true.
Which is why I hope, actually I'm not even sure it will happen, but I really hope for consolidation, because there are some really cool products out there that I think, I would love to see our lawyers, private practice lawyers using, but it's just too early stage still.
No, thank you, Shilpa. I know our time is up, and thank you very much for sort of the questions, but also giving a bit of insight about you and your thoughts, and obviously where Legal Tech Nakoda is and what you've done to get there. And I just want to say thank you very much for sharing that. And I look forward to you joining our next session, which will be diversity piece. So, we're going digging in a bit more, aren't we? Which is going to be great. So, it's been fantastic having you, and thank you for everyone who's been listening. And I look forward to seeing you again, Shilpa, and seeing you all, everyone joining us again for the next Legal Tech Talks. So thank you, and have a good afternoon.